listening to the Parts Pros podcast, the only podcast made specifically for automotive parts professionals. We're here to dive into the latest industry trends, expert strategies, and real world solutions to drive success and boost your parts department bottom line. Hi, I'm your host. My name's Amanda Poe, and I'm an automotive marketing expert with more than a decade of experience helping dealerships drive growth in the ever evolving digital landscape. I'm joined by two people from Revolution Parts today, our official sponsor, and I want to introduce Emily first. Emily is a parts and e-commerce guru with 5 years of hands-on experience working with both OEM and aftermarket parts industry leaders. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for the intro. I'm excited to have a fellow revolutionary on the show today and hear what he has to say about the parts world.
Absolutely. Jensay, the reason why we are all here today, Jensay Numa is the manager of dealer consulting services at Revolution Parts. It's actually a recent promotion. So congratulations on that promotion, Jensay. Jensay has been in the automotive industry for 15 years, spending the last two at Revolution Parts, helping dealers get their e-commerce business off the ground. Now, Jensay is uniquely qualified for this role because he has served as the e-commerce director at 11 dealerships across Florida. So he's done this a few times. Jensay, how are you today?
Doing very, very well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit about those 11 dealerships that you worked at before coming to Revolution Parts.
Well, let me I'll go through the quick history, and I'll tell you this, as you work in the automobile industry, one big thing is going up through the ranks, right? Most of the times when you meet a parts manager, parts director, they typically start out off as a lot porter or on on a service drive or something like that at one point. So I originally was a lot porter. And then from there, I moved on into the being a parts driver, and then I was in a parts warehouse. Then I was on a parts counter, and then I said, "Hey, why don't we sell parts online at the dealership I was working at?" And they said, "We don't know how." And I said, "I think I could figure it out." And then from there, I opened up a little eBay store, and that was about 5 or 6 e-commerce parts departments ago. And then from there, I built multiple different e-commerce parts departments. And I used Revolution Parts for 8 years as a customer before I actually came over to Revolution Parts.
So you are truly well experienced with Revolution Parts. Now, I would say, 10 years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, selling parts online was absolutely unheard of. You are, to use Emily's word, truly a revolutionary in this industry.
Definitely. It was not something that many people were speaking about, but when you look at the trends around that time, it was the direction everything was going. And it's funny when you see how much it's adopted nowadays. But I'll say there's way more tools and way more opportunity now than whenever I originally got into the industry for sure.
Absolutely. I can only imagine just my background being in dealership marketing, we would take the inventory at the dealership and we would create what was called a Facebook catalog so that we could advertise those vehicles on Facebook. And we would enter the cars one at a time, VIN number, color, description, just to get them into a Facebook catalog so that we could advertise those vehicles on Facebook. I can't imagine what you had to go through trying to enter those parts into eBay when your average dealership may have a few hundred vehicles, but your average dealership has tens of thousands of parts. That had to be a ton of work 10 years ago.
Yeah, so definitely taking a lot of individual photos, doing individual listings, learning how to do editing, learning how to do descriptions that were competitive, looking at your competitors. And I did it all on eBay. That's how I started off. It was the easiest platform to get on before Revolution had came about. And I knew it's funny because people think eBay is for like selling baseball cards or sneakers. But then you see all the other things that people actually are marketing on there. And I realized like there is a lot of used stuff that people are selling, but eBay was getting really big into like the new market around that time, so like newer items that people have. And obviously the benefit that you have when you're working at a dealership is you can list the dealership inventory. But that transition, man, between what the dealership has on hand to get it online, that was a daunting task. But I definitely tackled it for sure.
Well, that is an actually excellent transition into my first question for you. Tackling that whole process, getting your dealership on Amazon and eBay, it's a daunting project. How can a dealership get started selling parts on Amazon and eBay?
So, nowadays it's really simple. When I first started, it was daunting, like I said. But nowadays, all you got to do is literally, on eBay World, you just create a business account. You have to attach a bank account to it. And literally from there, once you are approved to sell on their platform, which is pretty simple, like validation things for banking and et cetera, and just proving validation of the business, you're up and running. Now when it comes down to the things you have to do to profit on the platform, it's a little different, but getting on it is really simple. Amazon, same thing. It's very, very simple to sign up and create an account on there, and start attaching to what they call their ASINs on Amazon. But yeah, it's a pretty simple process.
That's awesome. It's sounds like it's come a long way in the last 10 years.
For sure.
Yeah, eBay Motors is a massive and growing marketplace. What's cool about dealerships selling on marketplaces like that is you already have that built-in audience of shoppers that are totally loyal to eBay and marketplaces like Amazon as well. So, what are the downsides of managing your own Amazon and eBay listings rather than consulting an e-commerce expert?
Well, so I'll start this way, especially if you don't have a expert or a platform that you can use to or tool to actually, push listings up, read your inventory. When you're doing manual work on these platforms, you literally have to keep up with everything going on every second of the day. Otherwise, you get affected by their standards because you didn't change your inventory count properly. You didn't update your inventory count properly. There's a lot of things when it comes down to pricing, right? Being able to actually control. I mean, if you have 1,000 listings and, being in a dealership, we have monthly price updates, right? If you have a monthly price update and then all of your prices just changed overnight, well, you got to go in and update 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 listings manually. It's a daunting task. Once again, so I think that's my word for today is daunting without certain things. I mean, and you can do bulk uploads, but man, the manual work, to just keep up with everything is very, very tough. Especially when you're already in a dealership and you've already got 100 other things going on in a typical parts department, and then having to keep up with this while it grows. Now, the objective is for it to become its own baby over time and develop its own legs and everything like that. But to get there, you got to treat it properly. So I would say the inventory management, the pricing updates, and learning the standards and the rules on the platform. I mean, I always tell people I burned down 2 eBay accounts to have two successful ones. So I try to teach people not to burn them down.
We do that in the marketing world too. I have had more than one dealer take some really backwards and not recommended tricks to get into SEO, and just try to keep people from burning down their website is, I think, 50% of what I do.
Try, fail, and adjust, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you definitely got to play by their rules when it comes to eBay and Amazon. And that, I mean, that's just a whole nother reason it helps to have a partner who is seasoned, who has expertise, someone like you, Jensay, who's burned it down and built it back up, and learned along the way. So, what are the benefits of selling auto parts on online marketplaces like Amazon and eBay, especially with some of these challenges you're naming? What makes it really worth it?
Well, so here's the first thing I'll throw out is, when somebody's getting into e-commerce, right? Usually, if you have a website, a web store, or something like that that you're establishing, you've got to have marketing typically, because nobody knows you're there, right? So you're just kind of a website on your own trying to figure out how to progress. But when you get on a marketplace, people are recognizing the marketplace. People are finding you because of the marketplace. And typically at normal advertising, you'd have to put up ad spend. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with this, right? This is when every channel has different strategies, every e-commerce play is different. But you have to put up ad spend and then wait to develop traffic, right? From the ad spend. But you already put your money out, right? On a marketplace, you don't actually pay for any ad spend until after this quote unquote sale is made, their fees, right? So it's actually inverted if you really think about it. So you're not actually paying for anything until you generate the business, which is a little bit different when you think about the average starting off in e-commerce. So I feel like that's number one. It's an easier way for somebody to get used to the expenses in e-commerce because they're not paying for anything really up front except for like just the standard fees when they make a sale and the standard things to be on the platform. The next thing is that people a lot of times don't feel like they're buying from you, right? Because they don't know you when you're on e-commerce at the beginning. But if they're on a platform, they feel like they're buying from eBay or they feel like they're buying from Amazon. So there's a trust factor that comes in to generate more business because of the platform that they're purchasing through. And plus, eBay and Amazon have the rules that they do because they want to make sure that there's a like fairness between buyer and seller, which creates even more easier conversions for the buyers because they know that that's there, right? The next thing is that, I feel like because of how all their algorithms work now, if you do a Google search nowadays, you could be spending a bunch of money on ad spend. But eBay and Amazon's gonna pop up first, right? It doesn't matter how much you put up. If you're looking for a part, if you're looking for an accessory, you're gonna see eBay and Amazon, and then you're gonna see, other people that are on web stores and etc. So they a lot of times have the dominance, and even eBay's now getting into what they call offsite ads, which they are actually advertise like putting eBay listings on Google ads, right? Specifically. So there's a lot of that going on. And I feel like, if you're going to have a web presence, it's just wise to have a marketplace too, right? You can run both, depending on what platforms you're using simultaneously to progress on the platforms.
Jensay, that's actually a great point, and we should get into that and talk about that more on another episode. But there's a lot of things that you should and should not do when you get into e-commerce when it comes to advertising. I've seen many, many people make the mistake of trying to bid against, these absolutely massive tycoons like eBay and Amazon because they want to be there, they want to show up, and when they try to do that, it just doesn't work because nobody has enough money to beat eBay, right? Or Amazon. So when you sign up to do eBay and Amazon, you're selling your parts online. You're saying that they should sell or they should advertise on eBay instead of advertising against eBay.
Yeah. So so eBay has its own internal advertising, right, that you can participate with. But and I'll add another layer. Even if like because I know some of the like when I first got into this, as a and talking to my parts director and talking to my parts manager, and they're like, what are the costs? Is it going to be worth it? That fear and doubt that you kind of have when you're learning all of this stuff. Like you don't even have to pay for advertising up front on this. Just put the inventory on, let people know it's there, and then if as you grow, then you can start entertaining the advertising world, you know what I mean, on there. But you could still be seeing traction. Now if you do that in a web store by yourself, you're not going to see anything if you're not advertising, you know what I mean. So there's a lot of opportunities to see ramp and also value before you get into major investment, you know what I mean. But the people that do major investment obviously see major yields and gains on those platforms.
But that's the benefit of working with a company like Revolution Parts, right? You have a partner that can give you that advice, that has that experience to say, don't waste your money day one. Let's ramp up to it. And here's how we're going to do it to help, or we're going to help you do it yourself.
Yep. Absolutely. And I see a lot of people that, when they are functioning on a platform like this, they just realize like they think they put up a whole bunch up front thinking that there's something, this is the way I need to go, and it doesn't work. And then they think there's something wrong with the platforms or with e-commerce. Well, no, maybe it was something wrong with the approach. You know what I mean? Maybe it's just not being educated. Maybe it's not having guidance. Maybe it's kind of being in a no man's land by yourself, trying to figure it out. And, like we talked about earlier, I would rather learn from somebody that burned things down so I don't have to burn anything down. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I love about the e-commerce side of the parts business is you can start off with a pretty conservative small investment, test things, find out what works for you, your store, your brand, and then invest further. So you're not, losing your shirt just by getting started.
Mhm, definitely. I've also learned it's really interesting is a lot of times a lot of, parts managers, fixed operation managers, GMs, they don't want to get into e-commerce, not because of their experience, because they got a friend at another dealership that had a bad experience because he didn't know what he was doing. You know, and then they think there's something wrong with the industry, and really no, your friend didn't know what they were doing. You know what I mean? And all of this stuff when you have guidance, and I think everybody kind of realizes in 2025, like in about maybe 5 more years, if you're not doing e-commerce, like I don't know, your customers are not going to want to deal with you at that point. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of a necessary evil that if somebody views it that way, that they kind of have to get into. And it's even more interesting. Every other department in the dealership understands this. Every other department. except for some reason parts. I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? Sales got it down. They sell that you could sell 5,000 parts on a marketplace before you sell one car. But they got a website though, and they're selling those cars online. You know what I mean? So
Great point. So, I mean, you've been in the e-commerce game for a long time, and I'm sure you've picked up some kind of secret or insider tricks of the trade. What are some top tips for achieving success on Amazon and eBay when selling parts?
So this is a polar opposite of a typical parts department, what I'm about to say. So for all the listeners here, all right, I'm gonna throw it out. Um, in a dealership, most parts people have a mindset of I'm here, so you're going to come to me because I'm the dealer. So customer service is kind of there, but it's not the number one priority of a typical parts department. And I know if you're listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't even have to, I talk to enough dealers every day, and I've been in dealerships long enough to know this. But I will say a tip is customer service is huge online because you're not competing with your region anymore. You're competing with the world, and people get to choose now where they want to go, and it's really based on your service to them. So I used to have to teach my guys like, hey, listen, on these marketplaces they're looking at 15 other listings as they're looking at ours. We need to show them we want to earn their business. Like, it's not like the guy at the counter, you know what I mean, that you're like, oh, someone's here again. It's a little different. You got to really, customer service is number one. Number two is clarity on what's being purchased. That's huge. Especially if you don't like, one of the benefits when I was using Revolution, and still Revolution as today, this is not a Revolution plug, I'm just giving a mindset. But one of the benefits is a lot of that data gets transferred to listings directly on eBay, so that, and Amazon, so there's visibility in purchase, so that way people know what they're getting. And a lot of issues people have with e-commerce is people are buying things and it's not what they thought it was. That is a big issue with the internet. So that's what equals returns. That's what equals cancellations. So visibility of purchase is big. And another thing, is photos, man. Like taking time to take. I mean, what's amazing to me is we'll start sometimes coaching a dealership, and they will say like I'll make recommendations, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, and I'm like, don't you buy online yourself? Like, forget parts. Don't you buy online? What do you think when you're buying? It's the same thing you're dealing with the same customer. It's just a different, item that they're purchasing. So when you're buying, I want to see the photos of what it is. I want to have a good description of what it is. I want to understand it. So like a lot of people, they don't want to take the time to do the work to just like create clarity of what someone's buying, which also a parts guy, if there's anything a parts guy hates, is a person thinking they know what they're ordering and they don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? So it removes those situations from happening. Another thing I'd say is inventory visibility is big. A lot of dealerships have some dealerships have obsolescence that they're trying to get rid of. Identifying those items so that you can sell them on marketplaces is important. Some people don't take the time. Now we have a tool here where it identifies your inventory and automatically prices stuff and etc. But and also too, like inventory visibility with your PDCs. Like there's strategies to do certain things for offloading your PDC onto these marketplaces. And also once you start seeing growth, not being afraid to invest a little. I'm last example I'll give, if you guys don't mind. When I look at a dealership, the average dealership will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on an alignment rack, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a phone system, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, and none of this has created a return on investment, and probably is not going to for a while. But then we got a little website that we're questioning. You know what I mean? And to me, I'm like, have you looked around the dealership and seen how much money we just spent on just the remodel? I mean, yes, it makes it look good, but how much money is that going to actually make you is the question. Maybe, and nowadays, nobody even wants to go to the dealership. Let's make it even better. Let's just be honest, right? That's why we have services where they go pick up your car because the customer does not want to go in. So, like when I think about like tips and tricks, like the last thing of being willing to invest a little if you need to generate traction, because every other department is. So why not do that for the parts department and also for a web store? But anyway, that's my
I think
thoughts on
that's great
that.
advice. But also, I think you just taught me that dealerships are doing a whole lot of girl math. They bought that alignment rack 6 months ago, so therefore it's free. It's not costing me anything today, but my web store, I have to pay those fees today, so that's not free.
Mm-hmm.
That's I mean, that's how I do math at least. If I already bought it, if I already paid for it, it's here, I own it, it's free. If I'm still paying for it, that's when I really start to question it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a
Definitely.
huge fan of
And
that method, Amanda.
Yeah, it's why it's called girl math, because I think women all over are using that exact method of paying for things. All right, guys. Well, I think that is all the time we have today. Jensay, I could ask you 100 more questions. We're going to have you on the podcast again soon so we can talk more about eBay and Amazon and you can share some more about your experience. But as for today, I would love to hear either Jensay or Emily, if you could just give us a little bit of information about Revolution Parts. We have, two seasoned revolutionaries here. So I would love to hear from y'all's perspective who Revolution Parts is and why our listeners should care that you're here.
I'll let you take it.
Do you want to take this one, Jensay? or I can. I can.
Or you both can. You can
So-
both give me your elevator pitch. I don't care.
Okay, I'll kick it off, and Jensay, you can fill in the gaps. Revolution Parts is essentially an all-in-one solution that helps dealerships sell parts online easily and without the headache of having to do it yourself. We have helped more than 2,000 dealerships across the US get their parts listed online, simply sell them to a nationwide and sometimes global audience, bring that obsolescence way down to, in many cases, below 1%, and even manage inventory in a more streamlined, simpler, easier way through technology and automations, reducing manual work in the parts department.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. I'll say this, Revolution Parts, because when I was in a dealership, I used all types of different platforms. Okay, I'm not going to start speaking them on this podcast today, but I used them all. All right. And Revolution Parts was the one that I always went to, even if I was using another platform, just because I needed it for all the integrations and also to make my life easier as a parts director. So in my opinion, it's something that adds major value and makes your life a lot easier to function and connects very well within DMSs and also with marketplaces and web stores.
So I think we just heard between the two of you probably 10 times the word easier. So Revolution Parts makes your life easier, simpler, faster, better. What's the next word that comes in the song? Stronger. All of these things make Revolution Parts an amazing tool for parts directors everywhere. That's all for this episode of Parts Pros. Thank you both, Jensay and Emily from Revolution Parts, for joining me today to talk about not only selling on eBay and Amazon, but how Revolution Parts is helping parts directors everywhere to make their lives a little bit easier. For more information on the Parts Pros and our official e-commerce sponsor, Revolution Parts, visit partsprospodcast.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, or wherever it is you catch your latest podcast, or on partsprospodcast.com so you don't miss our next episode. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.